Republican side are on board. In fact, as we saw the vote, none of them were on board. But of course, this has some long-ranging effects. So let's talk about it tonight with Young Voices contributor Andrew Donaldson, who is live with us here on the Final Five. Andrew, good to see you again.
Good to see you, sir. Great to be back with you.
You called this in a piece in The Spectator, the gerontocracy roughly strikes again, because when you look at this Senate especially, you have some of the oldest people in government making decisions that are going to affect people for decades to come here.
Yeah, if you did one of your Fox 5 investigative reports and said, hey, we had a whole bunch of 80-year-olds that were forced to stay awake for 16 hours and do work, and intermediately were not allowed to do anything more than nap, you would have a mob on the street wanting to know what nursing home we need to go get shut down. But that's actually the U.S. Senate. That's what they did last weekend for 16 hours. You got these poor 80-year-olds going back and forth to their office. Chuck Grassley's talking about taking a nap. Poor Pat Leahy, they had to wheel him in his wheelchair coming off hip surgery, poor guy, and everybody's talking about his Batman sticker, which is cool, good for him, but nobody's going, maybe if we have to wheel in 80-year-olds to vote on something, maybe there's something a little more broken here than just meets the eye.
Well, how much of it is the fact that, because look, every election, every time you have an election rolls around, we've had people run against Dianne Feinstein, we've had people run against Chuck Grassley, he's up again this year, but you know, the fact is that they bring back the bacon to their voters, and that's one of the reasons they get voted back in year after year. Look, in West Virginia, Robert Byrd is a perfect example, somebody who up until the end was reelected year after year after year. So this is nothing new, but when you talk about the spending, it really comes into a greater perspective.
Yeah, Robert C. Byrd, when I go home, I got to go past 4 or 5 of those things that are named after Robert C. Byrd. I think it's up to 35 or 36 things in the state of West Virginia has his name on it in some shape or fashion. Joe Manchin ain't going to catch up to him, but he sure does seem to be trying. No, this is just part of the thing. The amazing thing here, Jim, though, is the one part of government we have the most direct control over. The House of Representatives every 2 years, a third of the Senate every 2 years. This is the part of government we have the most control over, and yet we do the least amount of change and the least amount of accountability over this part of government, and we tolerate the most amount of nonsense. It's pretty sad. These big bills, we're always doing legislative things. Does it not offend anybody that the greatest democracy the world's ever seen, representative government, and we're doing something called vote-a-rama to pass legislation? Those things just shouldn't match up in how great our country should be, and it's all kind of on us because we keep electing the same people, we tolerate the same results, and we wound up legislating mostly by inertia, which is kind of sad.
Well, especially on this bill, this is something where everybody thought that Build Back Better, whatever you wanted to call it, social spending was dead. And then it picked up some steam thanks to the likes of Joe Manchin, who came to a table with Chuck Schumer, and they found some common ground there. And then they had to cram it into a weekend. It moved very quickly. And if you're a Democrat, you're very happy with how it ended up eventually working out. But this seems to be the exception, not the rule, when it comes to big pieces of legislation like this, where it just all comes into being in a very short amount of time.
Right, but they've been legislating emergently and against deadlines, whether real or imagined. Like this deadline was just they had a break, they were coming off. But think of how they've done omnibus bills. Think of how they've done spending bills. Almost every October we do some kind of government shutdown crisis now. This is how they do it. They have to put up against a deadline and then shove things through, and then that's so they can put it in there, a whole bunch of stuff that otherwise wouldn't pass. This is just very, very unhealthy. Now, this got negotiated over a bunch of months because Joe Manchin kind of shoved it through. Schumer actually did a little bit of a flank and caught the Republicans a little flat-footed with this, part of the CHIPS Act. That's another bigger picture. Yeah. But overall, our legislative branch just isn't super functional. Even some of the stuff with the Supreme Court keeps saying legislative branch ain't doing its job. Executive overreach, legislative branch ain't doing its job. Fiscal house in order for our country, that's the delineated power of the United States Congress, not really doing their job. And we're not holding them accountable, so it's as much our fault as theirs.
And it's one of those things, too, that for years and years and years, these elections, these legislative elections, you know, maybe more so on the state level, but still, you know, once you vote somebody into the Congress, it almost seems like very rarely do you see them get voted out. And clearly, when we get to midterms, that changes a little bit. We may see a lot of that happening in November, depending on where the political winds blow. But how much of this is the fault of the system? How much of this is the fault of the people who put these people in the system?
Well, incumbency has a lot of built-in privileges to it, as we've seen. Congress a little less so, because you're basically running, you know, half of your term you spend running for office. The Senate is designed to be a little longer, but you've got a great point. But it comes back to what we just talked about. who is going to hold these folks accountable? The system doesn't hold itself accountable. It's supposed to be us. So it's what we tolerate. So if we don't like how our Congress is acting, eventually that comes back to us and we got to go find a mirror, because this is supposed to be representative government. Unfortunately, we don't like how we're being representative, but we don't want to put the two and two together and go, well, it's our fault. Let's vote in some new people. Now, we do it every now and then, but we don't seem to want to do it real consistently, do we?
Last thing, and you pointed this out in your article in the Spectator, Bernie Sanders is a perfect example of somebody who he got up onto the Senate floor, did not like many aspects of this bill, said it would not reduce inflation, wanted more when it came to Medicare, but he still in the end voted yes. That was a critical vote because you needed everybody in that Democratic caucus to get on board. And I get it. It's sort of like an all or nothing proposition when it comes to guys like him, who certainly have an agenda coming into the vote.
Yeah, well, it's always fun because in his day job as a senator, he's an independent. He's only a Democrat when he runs for president. But, you know, Sherrod Brown, the senator from Ohio, got caught on a hot mic at one point with his endless stream of amendments of, come on, Bernie, let's go here. This is part of the failure theater of the U.S. Senate, especially Congress, a little bit less so, but especially in the Senate. They talk a lot. They do a lot. Eventually, they're going to vote for it. Same thing with Joe Manchin, who got so much covered. We call it the 5 stages of Manchin, where he says he's going to do it, then he says he's not going to do it, then he negotiates it, and eventually he's going to vote Democratic at the end because that's who he is. Yeah. This is all part and parcel of the system, my friend.
Hey, before I let you go, I just wanted people to know, because you do a little talking just about every day. Tell people about the show you've been working on online.
Yeah, we do Heard Tell. It's radio platforms, also on all the podcasting platforms and YouTube. It's called Heard Tell. We don't yell. Grown folk talk about the issues that matter. We love to talk about culture and politics, and we do it without yelling, and we do it by talking to knowledgeable people all across the spectrum. Love to have y'all join us. We're pretty proud of it. Need to get Jim Lokey on there. That'd be a good segment, I think.
Let me know, man. Let me know. I'd love to do it. Just check. I'll tweet out a link to it. Andrew Donaldson, always good to see you. Thanks for joining me, man.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
And the Final Five is back after this.